Today, I'm going to talk about something that most people, it kind of blows their mind the first time they hear about it. And I think it's important and finds its way into the interview context as I think a very critical piece of something you have to know to be able to interview effectively. And that's understanding your 7 or 8 forms of intelligence. And the 8th is kind of a bonus off of the 7th, but I'm going to go through them all so that you can kind of understand them. So to start things off, I'm going to tell a little story. So back when I was in the 5th grade, I would come home from school and my dad would say, well, you had a math test today. How do you feel like you scored on that test? And I would say, I think I got about a B+ and A-. My dad would say, okay, we'll try to work a little bit harder next time on the test. Then my sister had a test the same day and he asked her, how did you perform in this test? And my sister said, I think I failed it. I think I did horribly. My dad, knowing that my sister was a straight A student, said, yeah, well, it may turn out a little bit better than you thought it did. A week later, we get our test results back. Sure enough, I would have gotten a B+, and my sister will have gotten an A on the test. You can look at that and say, okay, well, your sister is smarter than you. She does better at math tests than you do. But to the contrary, there is an actual form of intelligence that I bested her on. And that is actually my ability to assess how well I did on that test. So I was assessing my own mathematical skills and I was able to add up and see how I did on that test. And I was able to correctly predict how high my intelligence was in mathematics, where my sister was not. She grossly underestimated her ability to be at mathematics. How does this play? Well, in an interview, if you brought us both in and said, we need somebody with really good math skills, and I would say, I'm a solid B+, A- at math. And if you brought my sister in, she might say, well, I'm not very good at math, so, a lot of times I think I fail things. A lot of that's going to do with the confidence we feel. But in fact, obviously my sister was superior to me in math skills. However, I was better at correctly assessing it. So there can be certain roles where knowing how well we're doing at something could be critical. For example, an attorney who reads his opponent's brief and then puts together his brief, and he doesn't correctly assess how well his brief stacks up to the other opponents, may tell his client they should settle, where in fact his brief's superior. The exact opposite could happen if that same attorney overestimated their skills and thought that they had a better brief than the other attorney, and therefore they're telling their client they should go forward with trial when they should actually be settling. So you can see how actually assessing your intelligence can be a critical factor in your overall success. Well, now I'm going to take you through the 7 forms of intelligence because I think it's important so we see their role in our lives and how they play, and how if you can be just fantastic or the best at just one form of intelligence, a lot of times it's better than being just slightly better than average at all of them. So let's go through them. So the first is linguistics. That goes back to our attorney example, where having the ability to read and write stories and kind of organize our thoughts on paper, is a critical piece to being good at linguistics. The second is mathematics. That can do with being an engineer, can be being good at strategy or board games. It can also have to do with finance or accounting roles. Anything that has to do with numbers is mathematics. The third is body kinesthetics. So I always think of Michael Jordan when I think about that. Like, he's actually one of the greatest geniuses of controlling his own body. If you ever watched him move, it almost looked like so fluid and magical, like he was dancing out there. But it could be a professional dancer. It could also be a highly trained surgeon who has perfected fine motor skills, could be your dentist. Bodily kinesthetics can be very important, and having fine-tuned motor skills go along with that. The next is spatial, which has to deal with more or less being like an artist or someone in design or an architect that has the ability to see something and draw it and imagine things and know how things fit together. The fifth is musical, and that is obviously someone's musical consciousness, their ability to maybe play multiple musical instruments, being able to sing, put jingles together, or also being able to listen to something with a discerning ear, pulling the pieces out to single down and make something that somebody's listening to better. The sixth is interpersonal communication skills. So this could be someone who's like a politician, great at giving speeches or working the room. It could also be your high-level salesperson that's great at selling something to other people because they have this great interpersonal communication skill. Interpersonal communication obviously deals with being able to understand what's going on in other people's minds and feelings and being able to play off that to be a leader. Finally, seventh is intrapersonal skills. That's our ability to motivate and know ourselves. And kind of the eighth is off that, or maybe it's a little bonus, is your ability to understand your other forms of intelligence and actually correctly assess yourself at those forms of intelligence to either not sell yourself too short or not to put yourself in a situation where it could lead to a catastrophic failure. So for example, my body kinesthetics are, I would say, maybe just slightly lower than average. So I watch all these YouTube videos of these people in these flying suits jumping off the Swiss Alps. They fly down the mountainsides at 100 miles an hour. My eighth form of intelligence looks at that and says, if I attempted to do that, I would likely die. So therefore, I'm going to stay away from that. You can see how being able to correctly assess your other forms of intelligence can lead you out of harm's way, because if you watch somebody in front of you that jumps a canyon and then you figure you can do it, well, that can lead to a catastrophic failure. Now let's put this together in the job interview process. So in any role, you're going to be relying on more than one of these functions. For example, an attorney may be phenomenally good linguistically, but if they're terrible at math, when they get into a lawsuit or they're suing somebody and they have to go through and figure out and track down numbers to figure something out, they may be horrible at that, which in turn may disrupt their entire law career. Now, additionally, an engineer may need to be able to sell his new idea on how to redesign a process, but if he lacks the interpersonal communication skills to be able to do that, that engineer might not be able to be very proficient at their function. Finally, someone who's in the sales role who's incredible with interpersonal communication, but is weak at math, might not be able to put deals together that actually make sense for his company or for the buyer. You can see how balancing some of these out and thinking about them for any role is very important when you're in the interview process. Because, for example, an engineer, I may think, wow, you went to one of the top engineering schools, you've got phenomenal skills at mathematics and engineering, but if you don't have those interpersonal skills, then you may only be functional at the very lowest level of engineering in a company, because without the ability to sell your ideas to other people, all we can do is have you sit there and crunch numbers. So all of these relate. And so it's very important in the interview process that you're able to kind of think about that, because a lot of times we get so strapped into one element of our intelligence is what's critical for a job role, when it could be all of them together. Hopefully this helps you, and know that you are smarter than you are, because I can guarantee you in at least one of these areas, you are probably in the top 90% amongst people. In thinking about that as well, it's important that we kind of track our careers to our strengths rather than our weaknesses, but also know how these pieces fit together so that we can find roles for ourselves and sell ourselves to others, and additionally work on the pieces that maybe where we need to actually up our game a little bit. Let's say your interpersonal communication skills are poor. You can always join groups like Toastmasters that will help increase that, which will benefit your career. So hopefully this finds you well. Click the